So once again, good morning, everybody. And first of all, apologies for Arctic conditions. I hope that we'll fill the room up quickly, so we'll heat it up better than the HVAC that is busted for 2 days in a row. So apologies for that. We have no way to fix it as of right now. So welcome, everybody, to Introduction to Campus Wired LAN deployment using Cisco validated design. My name is Jakub Matela. I'm a technical solutions architect. I live in Krakow in Poland, and currently I'm part of the enterprise networking switching team. I'm overlooking switching and SD access for the EMEA from sales perspective. And today I'll be your speaker. I'll try to cover this high-level introductory level session today, and we'll go through the ways to deploy wired network campus LAN. So first things first, a few housekeeping items. We'll start the presentation since we're behind the schedule already. So if you haven't done so, please do download the Cisco WebEx app, join our WebEx room, so we will be able to carry over some of the questions you might have, or even the consultations for the campus deployment that you might have. I will be taking questions during the presentation, so feel free to raise your hand, and I'll try to answer the questions. If it will be sidetracking, maybe I'm happy to stay after the session or schedule the meet the engineer session, so we'll be able to consult your doubts or maybe investigate more potential design constraints. So we'll be keeping the WebEx room up until 24th of February, so we'll have plenty of time to discuss your questions and maybe to find out the answers to those. One more thing, since about 40% of attendees during this Cisco Live after 3 years of not having it in person is first comers. So this is the symbol that I'll put on some of the slides. It's for reference. So I'm not going to go and read every single line of the slide, but it's for you to come back to the presentation if you would like to revisit the content. So it's just the housekeeping item that don't be worried that I'm not reading through. It's for you, more content to circle back if needed. One more remark, if it comes to the presentation itself, it's been updated last night, so if you've downloaded the PDF version before, do it again, because there were some updates last night happening, minor ones, but just to keep myself honest with what's going to be presented on the screen. So once again, welcome. I think we should start with a warm-up, but maybe it's we'll be okay we'll survive and we won't be iced till the end of the session. So here's our agenda for today. We'll go through 3 items. Where do I start? Fundamentals, and we'll sum it all up. And as you might have seen, the agenda expands, so we'll spend most of the time on design fundamentals. We'll go through each and every layer of hierarchical modular design of Cisco validated design. We'll talk about how we can combine those modular parts of our network together. We'll talk over the security best practices, how to create a highly available network, and then which platforms should we use to do that. And then we'll sum it all up. We'll wrap what we've learned today. So again, remember, if you want to ask questions, just raise a hand, and I'll be happy to take it. So this is something that I would like you to remember after the session. Best practices don't hurt, but help. And sometimes it might feel like the practices that we are encouraging you to implement within a network while deploying it, they really hurt, because sometimes you have to overspend by buying second box just to keep up the redundancy. But in the long run, best practices will help you, because you will sleep well. You won't be worried by the night call if something's gonna get broken, because there will be a redundancy that will take it up. So best practices really help. They don't hurt at all, even though we'll have to give it a little bit more thought from here and there. So we'll move to the first part of our agenda. What is a campus LAN? So let's set up the foundation to our introductory session today. And here's the first place where I've used the reference icon. So the definition, the dictionary definition that we use in a CVD is here for you. But basically, the campus wired LAN is the connection of smaller LANs, but we are limiting ourselves to geographical area, one geographical area, meaning it might be a school with buildings connected together, or a hospital and its wings. It could be a dormitory or just a university campus. So what it means, what it implies, that we are looking at the part of the network that not only can be huge, but also is providing the internet and services access to hundreds, if not thousands of users and their devices. So that's why it's very important to think about what kind of the requirements our end users will have from our network, and accordingly plan our deployment. So this is a campus LAN network. We will talk about wired network today, so we won't be touching the wireless deployment aspects because it's a completely different aspect and we would need like twice as much time. So Cisco validated designs. What is that? These are the frameworks that will help us, that will lead us by the hand while deploying and planning the deployment. And this is a collection of Cisco best practices, because we did not only deploy one or two, but thousands of networks. We helped to deploy them, advised, and also troubleshooted thousands, if not tens of thousands of networks across over 20 years of our history of a company. So from time to time, we're revising those Cisco validated designs to refresh them, to change and go with the trend of time. That's why during today's session we'll be focusing on this left-hand side, campus LAN and wireless LAN deployment. So we'll stay on the wired side, and we'll use a little bit of this, you might think outdated, but it's still applicable, the campus LAN layer 2 access with simplified design. So those two are the ones that the session is based off. I've put three more positions from the center to the right, which are SD access oriented, because you know that Cisco introduced the technology a few years back, and it's our predominant technology if it comes to next generation access. If you'd like to get into those design guides, then there is a design zone from which you can jump to every technology and find all the CVDs out there, or you can just directly go to design zone for a campus where you basically will be able to see those and even more around SD access. So, important thing today in the afternoon, maybe you're already signed up for the session BRKENS-1500. So our code is 1500. 1501 is my friend Sean will be going through a little bit more advanced topics, and he'll touch also on wireless aspects of campus deployment. So I highly recommend this session. So let's start with setting up a foundation and talk a little bit about the principles. But maybe before I'll do that, who's here that is about to deploy first campus wired LAN network in his life? And this is where you're starting. So you got the task, raise your hand if you've got the task to deploy wired campus LAN, and it's the first time in your life, so you decided to just go for the foundational knowledge and grab some knowledge and start with the basics. Okay, I saw that most of the attendees are experienced network engineers. That's great. So who's there that will never deploy network design, that will never deploy campus wired LAN? Are there any people that will never touch configuration or architectural aspects, but you're part of the team that will be supporting the network engineers? Okay, great. So you're all experienced, and then I assume that you're here to revise the basics, but also to get a handful of information about what Cisco validated designs are providing you from the framework perspective, and also if we didn't maybe refresh some of the configuration. So if we're planning for the future, we should make sure that our network is very easy to be deployed. This is by far the most important aspect of deploying, because if it's easy to deploy, we'll spend less time and we'll waste less time on configuration. Then it has to be flexible and scalable, definitely, because we want to make sure that if our company will grow and we'll get the order to deploy a new wing of a hospital network, or wire new campus part, then we'll be able to do it quickly, and we'll be able to will be flexible if it comes to the way that our network is deployed. Most of all, it should be easy to manage, especially in a software-defined world. We should be able to put out the controllers out there to do it for us, automate all the things. And we shouldn't be worried about line-by-line configuration. We should be resilient. Our network should be resilient, so we'll be able to sleep well. And then advanced technology ready. Most importantly, we should have our network secure. And by security, we mean like different aspects. But since we are growing very fast, we are onboarding more and more devices to our network, we should make sure that whatever lands out there will be secured from inside and outside threats and potential attacks. So we set our foundation up, and let's move on to design fundamentals. Before going into each and every layer, we've got the hierarchical approach. So you might, if you've served in Army, I did not, but you know that in Army we've got very like chain of command, and we have to really follow the rules. And if we will reapply the same ideology to deploying networks, we'll be able to come up with very structured and modularized design. And what will it give it to us? Well, each layer will have specific role, just like in Army. Soldier has a specific task from his superior that he's responsible for filling. And then superior is responsible for delegating the task, but also he's answering to his superior. And just the same logic applies to our networks. If you want to be successful and you want to follow the hierarchical, modular deployment ideology, then we've got basically three layers: access, distribution, and core. Each layer has a specific role. It's built of the modular blocks, and it's really easy to grow if you'll be following from the start to the end of deployment this way of deploying it. It's also easy to troubleshoot because it's a 50% of a success if you know where the problem occurs, in case it occurs. And then we are creating small demarcations and also small fault domains. So if each part of our network has a specific role in our ecosystem, then it's really easy to control the damage, right? And we know that if one protocol is failing, then some of the devices won't be affected by that. And it promotes load balancing and resiliency. So simplistic view of how the core, distribution, and access layer could look like, it's like here. So one more remark, if you'll see some speakers are following this rule, if you'll see the blue lines between devices, it means that we have a layer 2 relation between devices, and the red one, it's for layer 3. So we've got some kind of routing protocol running between those devices. So it's just for your information, because we'll be following this idea, especially if putting all together and while presenting the design options and what relations between different parts of our networks are. So one more important thing, I've mentioned that we are using hierarchical approach because we are promoting scalability. And here you can see that we've got collapsed core and distribution devices connected to an access. But what if we are owning this network and our network director is coming to us and saying that we are employing new people, the new floors are being rented. In 1 month, you have to provide the access, internet access and network access to 500 more people. What would you do? Well, if you didn't follow the hierarchical and modular approach to deployment, then you would be in trouble. However, we are really able to push the core functionality, introduce new device, and then introduce also two distribution boxes. Therefore, it's really easy to scale out, and with a minimum disruption of the services, you're able to add endless number of devices. It all depends what platform you'll choose for core, what platform will be chosen for distribution and access, and so on. So the same way, it's really easy to scale down in case that it would be needed. We can just push the core role into one device that would be a capable one, and therefore we can grow, scale out, and scale in. So this is it if it comes to fundamentals of fundamentals. Maybe there are any questions before we'll move into breaking each and every layer of our hierarchical network apart. Great. So no questions, then everything's clear. Perfect. So let's move on to access layer. And as you can see, access layer is the first point of contact between the outer world, the outer endpoints, and our endpoints, our switches, our routers, and our network. So that itself implies different types of the access that we have to provide, or we have to be prepared for providing if we want to serve the purpose very well. So that would be a user with his workstation or cabled workstation. That could be a server, even access point serving the wireless access to the network, batch readers, printers, all sorts of the network equipment that you'll come across in the office, hospital equipment as well. So it means that we have to be prepared to connect those devices securely into our network. And usually the access switch is not the only network device in our LAN part. It usually connects to a router or some sorts of distribution switch. So it basically, access layer provides the access to our network. So it implies that we should keep in mind some sort of attributes that should be providing the access to the network, like wired access of different speeds. There are still some devices, even in refreshed networks, that are running at 10 megabits per second speed, and we still have to provide that speed in order to establish connectivity. But at the same time, there are extremely fast endpoints which are running multi-gigabit speed, so we have to be prepared for that. At the same time, providing wireless LAN access to make sure that we'll satisfy the needs of the wireless part of the network. It should be simplified and flexible, meaning that the layer 2 edge, there are still applications which are requiring layer 2 connectivity across access, therefore we have to be prepared for that. But if we're talking about layer 2, usually we're talking about spanning tree. So we have to make sure while designing it that there's not going to be a layer 2 span loop, otherwise we'll end up in a very, very bad situation. This is also the place where we'll enforce our policy, because this is the first touch point between the outer world and our network. So we need to make sure that whatever lands in our network will enforce our policy rules, and if something will breach those rules, we'll cut it off the access from spreading malicious packets around our network. It should be also the place where we'll take care of the quality of services. So we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes, but there are situations when our network is congested, and then our devices, and we, before deploying the configuration to our devices, we have to make a hard decision which packet is more important than the other. Usually that will be a video conference or audio or some all sorts of the soft phone applications, but in a hospital the priority order might be much different. So it all depends on what kind of deployment we're talking about here. And advanced technology ready, so more and more devices is ending up being powered by our switches through power over Ethernet, therefore enabling us to deploy smart offices. So that's why we need to make sure that whatever switch we're buying for the access layer will be able to satisfy all of these needs at the same time, preferably. And as I've mentioned about the congestion, there's term as oversubscription ratio. So let's do a quick math exercise, very simple. Let's assume that we have a stack of 4 switches at the access layer. I've just separated it for the easier visualization. And those switches are connected to the distribution switches paired in stackwise virtual. So we have from the access layer an uplink of 4 times 10 gig. And let's assume that our access layer is completely loaded, meaning that every port is utilizing at 100% of its speed. What would be the situation? Of course, we will be oversubscribing to what we can push up. So potential uplink bandwidth, assuming that we'll utilize everything we have from access to distribution layer, 40 gig, because we have 4 gigs, 10 gigabits per second each. From our access layer, therefore, we'll have 624 gigabits per second. So what it means that we'll end up in 15.6 to 1 oversubscription ratio. So what do you think? Is it good or bad? Should we keep on with that, or we should improve something? Exactly, right. So soft recommendation is actually, we should stay below 20 to 1, but as you mentioned here, it all depends on the applications. It all depends what kind of the utilization of the network is. So if if nobody's actually complaining about the congestion in the network, and we don't see that our buffers are on the switches and the QoS is actually sweaty, then there's nothing to worry about. However, if there are situations that we're having problems during video conference, or our critical applications are not being able to communicate, then this is the first place where we should look out for help and look out for the answers. So the best rule is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So COVID traffic jam versus the back to reality. And this is why the quality of service is an important aspect of deploying and preparing our network design. Quality of service is totally separate point of discussion, and it's very, very wide topic. That's why I highly recommend, if you haven't done so, maybe after coming back from Cisco Live, to watch this BRKENS 2096 session. It will show you different ways of the mechanisms that are ruling the quality of service within a Catalyst 9000 family product switches. And then you will find the difference between the way that we handle and the mechanisms that are running on UADP-powered switches. So there are two types of ASICs that we have within our switch family. UADP. So this is the way that the queuing and prioritization happens. And then there is a different type, Q200, or so-called Silicon One, where the mechanisms running quality of service are a bit different. So this slide is for you to keep in mind that whenever you'll be discussing or thinking about quality of service, keep in mind that depending on what device and which layer of quality of service you're thinking of, then you have to accommodate for different mechanisms running the queuing and prioritization within a switch. And as we are talking about ease of management, who heard about Cisco DNA Center already? Yeah, so our marketing is doing a great job. Majority of the room did. And actually, it's a very, very good tool for managing your network. It's not only, I'm bringing it up talking about quality of service, but it's not only. With DNA Center, you're able to define policies which are including the intent of your company. So therefore, you're able to specify applications which are very crucial for which are priority for your traffic within the certain segment of the network, which are just default and which are business irrelevant, therefore could be dropped in case of congestion. And we are expanding, you can expand each and every section and define which is the most important application, not only type of a traffic, but also an application level that should be queued up and then therefore prioritized in case of a congestion within a network. What you can do with that information is you can also allocate specific buffers to a specific part of your queuing profile. So you're able, if we'll go back, you'll see that we are defining here application policies. However, here there is a second tab, queuing profile, and we are able to assign a specific buffers for every segment of our for our device and every segment of our network. So we can attach different policies, different queuing policies, and different buffer policies to different parts of our network. Meaning we can create a site, and this site will treat the traffic in a different and queue it than the other. So this is for you just to keep in mind if you really want to make your life easier while managing the network. DNA Center, Cisco DNA Center is definitely way to go. So we've covered access layer. Let's move on to the distribution layer and its fundamental attributes. So we're moving one step up, and you can see that this is the place where we terminate layer 2 connectivity, and also this is the place where we are aggregating all the links from the access layer. It should be resilient because when we are aggregating, there's you're given a lot, there's a big pressure on you. So this is the place where we're terminating the spanning tree. So STP domain is no longer replicated upstream. There is the broadcast packet boundary, as well as we should provide some sort of load balancing. Additionally, This is the place where usually, if we're talking about traditional approach, we'll introduce layer 3 features such as default IP gateway, so the place from which all the devices connected to our access will head to if they'll need to leave the switch. Then efficient IP multicast, IP routing summarization for the upstream devices, and of course, this is the place where you would want to manage quality of service, predict it, and make sure that you will accommodate the intent of your company. And there are different setups of distribution layers, so different ways of deploying those bulky devices that we still call a distribution. It could be a 2-tier remote site, a tiny site that is directly providing connectivity to the access layer, so aggregating and then breaking to one. Then it could be a collapsed core, and just a service block, a large service block that, for instance, is serving connected to firewall, and then we are breaking towards the internet, and at the same time there are wireless LAN controllers, which usually are residing somewhere out of the local LAN, providing the access to broader number of access points and wireless users. So, if we're talking about the distribution, some time back we've introduced a simplified box design. And what do we mean by that? Back in the days, we had traditional 2-box design where you had to go and configure each and every device individually. And I bet that 40% of networks is still using that approach because it's still valid. If it works, don't break it. However, if we would into making our life easier, Cisco decided to introduce a number of technologies which are allowing you to do the same from physical point of view, physical perspective, and connectivity would remain the same. However, logical is much different. And this is because we are leveraging stackwise virtual or virtual switching system, or simply stacking of devices together. So if we'll put up a fight between left and the right-hand side and check who's gonna win, you'll see that on the left-hand side, we've got many boxes to manage. Spanning tree is a problem because we are not utilizing equivalently all the uplinks from the access layer. For each VLAN, we'll have to block one link just for the other to be forwarding. We've got loop avoidance mechanisms. We have first hop redundancy protocol for IP resiliency of the IP. So it's there, it's been there, we got used to it, but we could do better. And that's why single box design has fewer boxes to manage, simplified configuration, and from the logical setup, it's a spoke and hub design. So I think that the verdict is quite clear. We're knocking out the old traditional ways and embrace future. But of course, in many cases, the migration could be complex. So this is something to keep in mind. If you'll be refreshing the network, looking into changing the way that the distribution switch should be working and connected, then you should think about pairing up with stackwise virtual, VSS, or basically introduce stack that will make your life easier because you've got less touch points to control, especially if you're not using some sort of controller that will do it for you. And then again, we won't do the maths again. I will leave you for food for brain. So the same distribution to core oversubscription ratio occurs, and it's even more important because here we are even aggregating even more, and we should make sure that we won't be dropping too many packets. So in this case, we would have from access layer, assuming that we're utilizing 800 all the ports, we would have 800 gigabits per second of constant data being sent. While if you'll see from the uplink of the distribution all the way to core, we would have only 80, meaning that our oversubscription would be 10 to 1. And this is the moment that we should consider introducing new uplinks, maybe putting them in Ether channel just to keep the load balancing and equal utilization of both core devices. Again, this is something I've mentioned about. There is a different way of, different mechanism of queuing quality of service for Q200 power devices with new ASIC that we've introduced with Catalyst 9500X and 9600X SUP2. And there is a new way of queuing it. And Q200 ASIC is tailored for big scale. It can accommodate entire internet. However, the features, if you're looking for the features and flexibility of the features, maybe UADP3 would be a better choice for you. So it's if you'd like to learn more about QoS itself and the Silicon One architecture. These are the two sessions that you definitely should visit if you're not already signed for them. So now let's move on to core layer. So we've covered access, distribution. Now, how about core? Core is by far the top one and the most important if it comes to from a failure perspective. So it's an aggregation for distribution. Obviously, we should not introduce a complexity when we're talking about the core layer. It should be highly resilient. So whatever happens, we're prepared. The box dies, we're prepared, the other will take over. And that's why it's so important to have this single box design, because it's taking away the pain of configuration from us. So no high touch, no high complexity. And this is the place where we only manage layer 3. We don't want to bother with layer 2. We don't want to risk that there will be some sort of loop introduced in our network. So the question is, do I really need core layer? Because in some cases, it may feel like distribution is just fine. And yes, however, if you're looking at this diagram, if you're even thinking about it, logging in and changing the routing protocols from left to right or north to south, it's difficult, right? So is it easy to configure such a mesh? Not really. There's no aggregation for uplinks, and the uplinks, as we know, are expensive, especially from distribution to distribution. This is what we're paying for, the speed and the SFPs, transceivers. And implementing change, it's a headache. So resiliency is not there, but I must admit it's doable. So you can do it, definitely. And I guess that I've seen many networks that people were doing it and they keep on going until something breaks. But wouldn't it be much easier if we would do it this way? So if you haven't done so already, or you're planning deploying new network, maybe it's worth to think about going from a just distribution and number of distributions which is connected to each other to introducing the some sort of one-box solution, VSS, and introducing a core layer for just an ease of deployment and to manage it in an easy way. And now let's put it all together. What options do we have? So we've discussed what do we need from each layer, but how it all comes together. And first of all, we have traditional campus design, multi-layer campus design, and it's been there since 1990s, and most probably you come across the setup. So we have layer 2 between the distribution and the access, and layer 3 between access, between distribution and core. So you know that it's a complex configuration, especially if we're talking about routing protocols, because you have to take care of the left and the right-hand side of the equation just to make sure that the IP is right there. First hop redundancy protocol of some sort is your concern at the same time. So on our scoreboard, we are scoring 2 out of 6, because it definitely can survive device and link failure. And we have the connectivity of the layer 2 between the switching racks, but that's about it. We expect a little bit more from our networks. That's why in early 2000s, Cisco revised this, design, and we've made an attempt to push layer 3 boundary lower. So what would happen if we would introduce a routing protocol on the access layer? Wouldn't it be easier? Well, there is a lot of benefits into layer 3 being introduced already on the access layer, because we are moving this demarcation point. We are leveraging whatever is best in layer 2 on the access switch. However, we're easing on complexity side. So we don't have to manage STP between access and distribution. So it's great. But for some reason, not everybody deployed rooted access, as we call it. Why so that? Because there's few constraints. For instance, we don't span VLANs between access devices. Therefore, some applications are still requiring pure L2 to communicate, like batch readers. So there is a workaround. You can wire the batch readers all the way to one access switch, and if that switch dies, then you're basically not able to get into the building. But there is a solution. The other thing is that the IP addressing management is complex as well, because you have many more small IP segments that you have to take care of, since you have many IP connectivity between devices and all P2P links that you have to take care of. So Additionally, there is a cost associated because the access layer switches should understand layer 3 protocols, and sometimes it's the cost of licensing or completely different different platform. So if we sum up layer 3 rooted access, it definitely has a lot of benefits. As you can see from a physical, on the left-hand side, we're moving all the way to routers, but these are the switches with layer 3 functionality on top. So we have layer 3 between access distribution and core across. We are eliminating first hop redundancy protocol constraints, layer 2 spanning tree loops. They are not there. We don't have to take care of trunks. We are utilizing our uplinks very, very efficiently. So we're scoring quite high, 4 out of 6 if it comes to our scoreboard. What we don't have layer 2 between our devices across access, and we don't have an automated way to deploy it. So we took a step back, and what if we would include a simplified box into layer 2 access? Then we end up with a situation that we indeed have to handle layer 2 protocols, but we have less boxes to be worried between the relation of layer 2 and potential spanning tree loops are not there. So this is the new approach to and leading approach to our campus design. When you're leveraging new technologies like VSS, SVS, or stacking, and we are not worried about the spanning tree blocking one of the leaks, because we are efficiently utilizing our uplinks from the access layer, and we have just fewer devices to manage. And it's very scalable at the same time. That's something that we've covered at the beginning. So we score 5 out of 6. It's pretty good, but we still don't have an automated way to deploy it. And it's because I've already mentioned about software-defined access. This is our leading next-generation campus technology that covers a lot and solves a lot of the problems. However, you have to be prepared to deploy SD access. And some of you, did you actually approach deploying SD access in your network? Yeah, just very few. I know some personally, yes, so few of you did. And indeed, it takes a lot to deploy SD access. It gets simpler and simpler, but the crucial part of the equation is this new symbol, DNA center on top. This is the predominant feature of DNA Center that it was created with a couple of years back, over 4 years ago, as the access was introduced. And we are able to introduce on top of our physical network, we can virtualize layer 2 and layer 3. Therefore, we don't have to worry about the spanning tree loops. We can deploy almost any design on top of the physical underlay that we have. We are provisioning, and we've got the policy enforcement from the access. Provisioning is very easy and simple because our management tool takes care of that. We are integrating the same policy for wireless and wired. This is important because in all the previous designs, we didn't talk about wireless at all because we treat them differently. If it comes to SD access, you treat them the same way. The same policy, the same rule of enforcements apply to wired and wireless endpoints in SD access. But it requires automation to be deployed. Therefore, we score 5 out of 6 again, because we don't have device-level CLI configuration, although I would mark it 5.5, because latest improvements to DNA Center are allowing us to deploy very intent templates and change the configuration up to our desire. So, if you want to learn more about SD access, definitely 2502 BRK-ENS session is for you. Visit that. We'll go under the hood, how it works and what you should consider upon planning deployment of SD access. So, we have it all together, just a summarization for you to digest what's best for you. And there is a next session running in the afternoon today at, I think, 4 p.m., BRK-ENS 2031, which is going into each and every of these deployment options with more details, more per line configuration, more considerations. So the guys will have more time to deep dive into what's best for you. Today we're scratching the surface, presenting what Cisco validated design is allowing us to do according to the best practices. So we've summed up access, distribution, and core layer, we know if, after combining all of the information, what we are able to achieve. Are there any questions to what was just covered? Any doubts? Please.
Did you have a design about the new VXLAN EVPN mechanisms?
Thank you. So the question was if we have VXLAN EVPN design. So our guides are being revised as we speak. So there are already guides how to deploy VXLAN EVPN as it's standard, industry standard. So SD access is Cisco invention, while the EVPN is standard and it applies to more and more customers to stretch it all the way from DC to access in the campus. Yeah, we do have, and actually there is on the roadmap, there are some ways for you to be able to automate also VXLAN EVPN deployment from DNA Center, but it's yet to come. The roadmaps to be confirmed. But yes, we'll be having also the papers on that being updated from our CVD perspective. So our way to go, if to answer shortly on your question, our way to go is SD access. However, if someone would like to see more benefits in EVPN, then definitely we'll support that. Our platforms are supporting it already. It's just there's no automated way to do it. Does it answer your question? All right. All right. So let's do security best practices. So we've covered what we have to put together, how we have to put it all together, but we can't forget about the threats to our networks, and we'll go through a few of them. It's not entire list, and that's why here on the right, lower right corner, we've got the position for you to dive into if you want to learn more about best practices for a campus or so for WAN and wireless LAN. Best practices from security perspective, but we'll go through this inverted pyramid from bottom, from the basic, but also very important, to the most high level aspects of securing our network. So we'll start with the port security, and port security is securing our network from CAM table overflow attacks. So the CAM table is a finite, this is a table that has a finite number of MAC addresses that we can register on our switch. And why would we care about the number of MAC addresses being registered in our switch? Well, simply because someone could connect to our port and start spamming MAC addresses, registering one after the other, random MAC addresses. What would happen after a while? Do you know what would happen if we wouldn't stop this person from doing so? There you go. Exactly, yeah. The switch would start flooding. So it's a finite number. CAM table is a finite number, and at some point we are filling the entire space for MAC addresses. And then the switch has to make a hard decision. He has to dump the MAC addresses that were previously registered and register new. And what if those endpoints which were previously there want to communicate? They want to send a packet. So switch has to make a decision. Do I drop it or I forward? But if I forward, then when? And then the easiest solution would be, well, I'm going to flood it, hoping that it will get to the address, MAC address. And that's happening. So if we wouldn't stop registering MAC addresses on a port, then we would turn a very expensive switch in very, very stupid hub. And it happened. It was very popular attack in 1990s, but it still happens. So that's why you have to predict that and secure your port with this simple command: switch port security, and then after maximum we state the number of MAC addresses that we can register on a port. After which, well, if you breach that number, there is an aging time, so after 2 minutes you'll be able to register new, but before then, no. Simple attack, but very powerful if executed properly. Of course, attacker requires the direct access to our port, but it's not that hard from within the campus building. So the next one, DHCP snooping, the protection that allows you to first of all, mark ports on which you will trust the DHCP reply message within your network. Usually, we are expecting that the DHCP server resides somewhere on the uplink side of our network. We are not expecting that someone would connect the DHCP server to the access port. Therefore, the DHCP request, when it's flooded to our switch, it might get into the endpoint. Usually, the endpoint or the workstation should drop the packet because he's not actually interested in responding to a DHCP request. However, if it's a malicious person, he may attempt to send a DHCP reply, offer the IP address, which might reside in a range of that particular LAN part. However, then he would be able to swap the IP gateway address to his own and being the man in the middle. So this is the famous man in the middle attack, man in the middle that would intercept all the packets and then be able to inspect everything on a fly. So that's why on untrusted ports, we are able to block the DHCP offers, and we are only allowing the DHCP offer from the trusted port, so where we expect the DHCP server to reside. Not only we are allowing it, but also we are keeping the information about the MAC address to IP address pair, just to use it later down the road. How to configure that? It's per VLAN configuration, so IP DHCP snooping VLAN, and then you specify the VLAN on which you want to perform snooping. Important information, you also want to limit the rate of the request that will be happening on a port, because it's also a finite number and a CPU heavy action, snooping on a DHCP. So this is the other way of attacking, just overloading the CPU of our switch. That's why you don't want to put the packets per second too high. Otherwise, you may find the CPU utilization very high. So, dynamic ARP inspection. This is a second way of performing the man-in-the-middle attack from using the ARP packets. And this way, our client on untrusted pod would advertise the MAC address, and we would simply check if the MAC address binding to IP, if the MAC address that we expect to appear on that port is the one that is actually being advertised. Otherwise, if the MAC address advertised from that port is not the one that we expect, we wouldn't allow it to flood the network, just not to fool all the other users on the network with, again, swapping the information about the default gateway at some point. Again, you can enable that in a global configuration per VLAN, and also keep in mind its rate limiting should be in place because it's a CPU-heavy action. So we are still, as you can see, utilizing DHCP binding snooping table. And one more way to protect our network using this table, which we are fulfilling with the DHCP snooping, is IP source guard. So what happens if someone would try to spoof the IP address on our network, expecting to intercept the traffic? Well, we'll check. If it's an untrusted port, we already have the registration binding during the DHCP exchange process. So we'll check if the address is the one that we expect. If not, then we won't allow sending a traffic with from that IP, because this person is impersonating other endpoint on our network. Oh, too far. And you should just enable it per interface. IP verify source will do the job. Of course, we are using the DHCP snooping, so it works together. Additionally, we've got IPv6 router advertisement guard. So how many of you is using IPv6 in the network, like actively addressing with IPv6 in campus? Nobody. Okay, but everybody is actually prone for the attack of the IPv6. Why? Because modern devices, they are shipped with IPv6 service running out of the box. So we don't use it, but, well, you might think that, well, that's not a problem because I'm not readdressing, I'm not routing any IPv6 packets out of my switch, so what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that some of the other devices may have running in your network, like laptops, workstations, IPv6, despite of the fact that you're not assigning them addresses. If we would have a router, then it would just present itself as a point to contact within the IPv6 range. And therefore, we would end up in a situation when this guy would be serving our IPv6 traffic without even our knowledge, because our service is running on a box anyway. So unless you're specifically turning off IPv6 because you're not using it, then you're prone to the attack of router advertisement. That's why we have to define the policy in a global configuration where you define what kind of a policy applies to what kind of the endpoint. And we can define the monitor, router, and a host. So then you're able to attach the policy. Like if this is the host policy, then for sure from this port, we shouldn't expect any router advertisement. So if we'll get IPv6 router advertisement flying on the port, that is host, we'll just block it and ignore it. And .1x. Very heavy topic, and I'll try to go very easy on it, but it's not here to we're not here to talk about how .1x really works under the hood, but just to flash you the information that if you'll come across the discussion with the security team, because the security team will be pushing for the .1x enforcement of security, so you'll be understanding where they're coming from and what they want to achieve. Although I'm not denying that most of you most probably knows .1x, but for those that may not come across it, let's assume a simple situation that we're here trying to connect on Monday morning to our switch, and we'll be talking about the wired connection because wireless works a little bit different. So we'll just look at the wired authentication using .1x. So this is our client, ourselves, or supplicant, as we call it in .1x, and network authenticator will be a device to which we connect, to which port, at Ethernet port we connect. Next, we have the radius relation between our network authenticator and our AAA server. AAA stands for Authentication, Authorization, Accounting Server. In our case, Cisco has a solution for that. It's ICE, Integrated Services Engine. And then the last player in the equation is Identity Store. It could be ICE, but it could be anything else because you have an Active Directory in your network. This is the place where we will verify if our credentials are valid. So we connect, basic connectivity is established, and our network device is sending IP start message. IP stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol. And our supplicant installed on our device, because the devices that we are connecting and should be running .1x, they will be they will be unloaded with the software that will prompt us that we want to start IP tunnel all the way to our AAA server, and we are told to sign up. It could be a credentials, it could be some sort of certificate, or it could be credential certificate or anything that would authenticate us within our domain or token, for instance. Then the information that we are inputting on our keyboard is being packed in .1x, transmitted to the authenticator, which then is moving it within a radius communication to AAA server. And what happens when the AAA server receives the message? Then it simply strips it off, and we need to verify if the guy on the left is actually the one and his credentials are valid. So he will send, the AAA server is sending the information all the way to Identity Store. And then this is the moment that authentication happens, because we are checking if the credentials are valid. Upon the valid check, the information is sent back to the ICE, or any other AAA server. And this is the moment that authentication, so first part of the process was finished. However, now it's time for the authorization. So can we be authenticated but not authorized? Yeah, we can. Simply because the user that we use, for instance, could be not present in any of the policy rules, authorization rules, or we are actually not allowed. Well, the employee was laid off the day before, so he's not able to get on the network anymore. So ICE is performing the check, authorizing the device or user into the network. And upon successful check, it's sending back the information to authenticator, and based on the information, we make the decision. We pack it back to .1x, and port is either authorized, so our authentication and authorization was successful, or it's not, and will be locked out. Sometimes we may end up in a quarantine in a special VLAN prepared for devices which are undefined. It happens especially with the new employees onboarded to the network, and for some reason they connect, everything's fine, and after a couple of seconds the connection is gone. Most probably the Active Directory piece is not done, and they are not falling into the right rules. It happens. So this is a simplistic view of how .1x flow works. There are different flavors of .1x, and by flavor I mean different combination between what supplicant we use, what kind of the authentication method we're using in our network, and what's our identity store and AAA server. So in general, this is the flow that we have to go, our thought process, and if a security team is approaching us asking about the .1x, then definitely we shouldn't avoid the conversation, because it's a valid point. Our principles are that we want to be very secure and want to be sure who's and what's on our network, and we don't want to internal attacks happen. And last on our list, but not least important, is Cisco Umbrella. And we'll be focusing on DNS level of security. However, it's all package of cloud-based security solutions. And we are able to secure our devices, network devices, which are on and off the network. Meaning that it doesn't matter if our endpoints or users are connecting from within our campus LAN network or they're working from home, we'll be able to give some certain level of security to them. And we'll focus on the most basic one, but very efficient. It's DNS layer security. And how it happens. Let's assume the situation that we're talking about campus wired LAN, so it's we're connecting, and I think that the numbers are quite odd with the format, but you got the point. So a laptop is connecting to our internal network, and when the DNS comes in place, it's very effective because we are performing DNS queries daily, not dozen, but sometimes 100 times a day. Our brains are working with names, surnames, but not that well with digits, especially with the changing numbers or IP addresses. So when we're looking for a Facebook page or Google or Cisco.com, we're typing www.cisco.com. None of us keeps track of closest to us a server, IP address of a server of a certain website. This is the job of DNS server, which stands for domain name system. And the domain name system resolves the name and sends back the information about the IP address to which we have to connect. And this is very prone for the attack, very vulnerable part of the entire internet experience, because what if an attacker is replaced for some reason, or our DNS system in our router is being spoofed and replaced to a malicious one? Then we'll get redirected somewhere. Maybe the web page will look exactly the same, and maybe we'll be able to attempt login. So we'll put our login and a password, and this is enough for the attacker to get the access instead of us. So that's why it's really important, and it's really easy to be secured from DNS layer attack, while we just specify, for instance, Cisco Umbrella DNS servers. And it's a very good tool for you, for your home. It's like a piece of an advice, because Cisco Umbrella acquired OpenDNS. And OpenDNS is still free service, and you can use it for your home security. If you don't want your children to browse on a malicious or suspicious website, you just simply can use free DNS servers. You can reconfigure your home router, and then your home is safe, secure. You can, for free, create an account and track DNS queries, and also filter those that you don't want yourself or your children to browse through. And the same applies to campus level security. So it all starts with DNS security. Well, because we can secure our ports, and it's really hard to perform from inside attack. But if we're the ones that will download the malware by clicking in the wrong place, it's very easy we're very prone to the attack. That's why Cisco Umbrella is on the top, because it's not only DNS level security, but it's, as you could see, we have many components like secure web gateway, cloud deliver firewall, but it's just one component that makes a very, very big change if it comes to security of your network, since we are all providing internet access to our campus users. Plus, it takes very, very little to do it. On a router, you just change the IP address of DNS on the device. Like if we are allowing to bring our own tablets or own laptops or cell phones and connect them to the wireless network of our campus LAN, then we should install Supplicant that will enforce the DNS query resolution. So this is what we summed up from the security best practices. We've got one more very important section to go, but before we'll move on, are there any questions to what I just covered regarding the security best practices? Okay, so far so good then. So LAN high availability, a very important topic, and we've got many options if it comes to what high availability features can we pair up to make sure that we are secure and resilient in case of failure. Usually it's a physical device failure or one of the modules line cards failure. If you want to learn more, then definitely visit BRKENS-1500 because it goes all about HA and it goes in details through each and every one of these features and even more. So list is extensive and high availability is very easy if you boil it down. So let's boil it down. First of all, on our list is HA with SSO, so stateful switchover and non-stop forwarding. And we can use these two features on both modular chassis as well as in switch stack. And how it works. So SSO is actually keeping the synchronization between active module of our supervisor in modular chassis between active and the standby. And the same happens if we're looking at the stack of switches. So active and a hot standby, they are synchronizing information about running processes and configuration between each other. So therefore, in case of the hardware failure, the traffic loss is minimized to minimum. And non-stop forwarding allows us for a graceful restart. What it means? It means that in case we fail, our supervisor dies, so to say, we are able to pick up all the routing peering between our neighboring devices quite quickly because we already have the configuration in place and we have the information about them. It's just the other side has to make an updates about us. And the same happens with the stateful switchover on a stack of switches. So it's the same mechanisms in different deployment scenarios. So it's two separate devices connected with the stack cables in the back on the right-hand side or modular approach with a modular chassis. So two supervisors being connected and part in SSO. So this is high availability with SSO and non-stop forwarding. And if we're talking about the switch stacking, we have two devices, active and a standby switch within a switch stack that are able to take part, that are able to synchronize information about configuration and the routing protocols between each other. So in case of failure, in case of active failure, the standby will take over. And in case we don't boot up the active back after some time, the new standby will be elected. And we have different stackwise technology speeds, so we are able to bundle the switches together and therefore achieve like huge speeds. And 1 terabit per second is the speed available only within stack made of 8 switches of 9300X. So this is the newest platform available, an expansion to Catalyst 9000 family, and we are able to achieve the total bandwidth of 1 terabit per second. So we are able to, within a stackwise technology, to bundle up to 8 switches together. And it's also some sort of redundancy because every single switch in a stack, as you know, is taking part in a data forwarding. It's just one brain. The second is waiting for an eventual failure and it's prepared to pick up in case that happens. And we've got stackwise virtual now. So traditionally, we had 2 devices before introducing stackwise virtual technology. We had only 2 boxes and we had to take care of all the configurations. So HSRP, spanning tree protocol, we were not utilizing the downlinks or uplinks entirely because we had to block on some VLANs. However, when we would pair those devices in Stackwise Virtual, then we create a so-called SVL link between those devices. And through this link, devices are updating each other on its own state, as well as on the configuration and running processes. Therefore, we are able to utilize very efficiently the links which are bundled downstream with LACP or PHGP. And from the logical perspective, we only have hub and spoke situation here. Therefore, we are utilizing the links that we've paid for, as well as the boxes efficiently, and we have less point of contact to control. And in Stackwise Virtual setup, the active device takes care for management stuff, layer 2, layer 3 protocols, software data path, and both of these devices are actively switching packets, so they're forwarding and taking part in a data plane actions. And here we have Stackwise Virtual and VSS, how to connect those devices to our downstream switches. What is the efficient way to connect, to utilize, to get the most out of our simplistic deployment? So it may sound like a good idea. However, what happens if we will lose one of these links? We basically lose entire connectivity to the access switch. So, well, it's semi-optimal. What happens in this scenario? It may sound like a better idea, but again, we are not utilizing these two devices in VSS or as Stackwise Virtual equally. So the most efficient way is to roam to home from access to each member of VSS or Stackwise Virtual. Therefore, we are secure from a hardware failure of one of the uplinks or one of the devices in the stack, in VSS stack, and we are utilizing the data path equally. We are load balancing packets efficiently, so we are basically utilizing the uplinks that we paid for. And also, the alternate option is that if our upstream device is our stack of switches, then maybe think about putting one uplink to a different member of the stack. Therefore, it's easier to load balance and be secured in case of that particular member of the stack failure. In-service software upgrade. What's that? This is the piece of a software that allows us to upgrade part of our software while the switch is still running and all the services are not disturbed. So how it looks, let's assume that we have a Stackwise Virtual or here, and those devices are updating each other on the situation. We are switching packets like nothing happens, and we've decided that we want to upgrade the software. So we start from the right-hand side device, and on the right-hand side, the standby device starts to upgrade software from version 1 to version 2. So we are performing sub-second convergence, and our packets are being switched through the active device, just like the hardware failure would happen. However, this is something we control. So we are not losing the peering with the other devices within our network. We are still peering through L3. We are just changing the data path for some of the packets. Then if the second device, previous standby, boots up with the version 2, then we do the same. We switch our data path again, and our active or former active is reloading, attempting to upgrade its software. And then the sub-second convergence happens, and both of the devices are then running the same version of software. And everything happened while still switching packets and still keeping up the relation between peer devices. The only change is that the active and standby switched places at the end of the process. Any questions to what we've covered until now? Please.
There is a lot of limitation with the ISSU mode, because you cannot upgrade to major version. It's like selected version by Cisco. When Cisco will remove this limitation that we can upgrade major version with the ISSU mode.
Okay, so it's more like a comment, right? That when. So we can check the specifics. So the question actually was when will be the caveat where going from specific version to enabling ISSU removed. So ISSU has been introduced recently, and it's to specific platform of switches, and so we won't update the software before then. So you have to migrate to a certain software number from 17.3 or 6, as far as I remember well. Then on, you are able to migrate to use ISSU, and it's not across all the Cat9K platforms. So that's not going to change. So we won't revise that. We won't update the software on like 16 train or 15 train for the Cat9K. It's just that you have the feature available from a certain moment. Does that answer your question?
From 17.6, I will be able to read to 18 without interruption.
Oh, that's something that I had. Yep. So the caveat is that you are not always able to perform ISSU from one version to the other specific, and especially if this is a major upgrade, right? But that's something that we can check afterwards. I don't remember the release notes exactly, but that might be right. So once the ISSU is supported on a certain platform, then from a certain iOS XE version, you're able to perform ISSU without the service disruption. But please stay afterwards or shoot the question on our WebEx page, and definitely I can check the details for you on that one. Thank you. Oh, there you go.
On which 9K platforms is ISSU not supported?
I'm going to have... Yes, I have a so the question was on which platforms ISSU is not supported, and I will show you the quick cheat sheet and a summary in a couple of slides. You'll see where it's not supported, but generally you're looking at the devices which are supporting stackwise virtual or VSS pairing. So ISSU is not yet supported on stackwise devices, meaning the stack of switches. Power redundancy. So we are able to secure ourselves from failure of power source units. And as you can see, we can achieve that with connecting devices together, the back panels, with the stack power cables. And we are able to connect up to 4 switches in stack together to form a power ring. And what do we achieve by that? It's a fancy name, HA with zero footprint RPS, but it's literally that, because RPS stands for redundant power source. And we have 2 ways of deploying power redundancy. We can introduce the new power source device that will connect to a stack power back panel of each and every switch, and each switch will be pulling the power from that redundant power source in case of its own power source failure. However, this other device, this redundant power source, is usually consuming energy, a lot of it, and is heating our DC room for no reason, of course, unless there is a problem with the power source unit of one of the switch stacks. However, how we can achieve the zero footprint RDS is we are able to connect the switches together, which are forming the ring, and now we have a power budget. And in this case, we have 3 power source units of running on 2 switches, and a budget of these is 2,530 watts. So what it means that every single device within a stack power ring is able to use equally the power that all the power source units are providing. Therefore, each switch is given their minimum power budget, and in case of a failure, like let's assume that the 715 watts power source fails on a top switch, as long as our ports are not draining more power than those remaining 2 are providing, we are able to keep on going and power the devices connected to access ports. And we can stack up to 4 of these together with the stack power cables to form a ring, and therefore be self-sufficient without introducing and purchasing redundant power source, if these are not the requirements of our setup, if we are not relying very, very heavily on making sure that we are double secured with the external redundant power source. So all devices are pulling from the common power budget in this case. And last feature that we'll go through is extended fast software upgrade. It's especially, so instead of ISSU, we've got extended fast software upgrade on stacks in this case. You're able to perform the action of very quick upgrade of a software within a stack by just putting the configuration add file image activate reload fast commit. And what happens step after step, how extended fast software works on Cat9 case. We have first the execution on install image on all switches. So we are installing on every single device, but we are not executing yet the change of the software. First, the change of software happens on a standby and all the members of stack at the same time. So, and additionally, we've introduced the feature of fast reload. So it's not taking as much time as it used to. Then all the switches, standby and members are being reloaded, coming back, and we also are leveraging stateful switchover between active and standby. So there is a synchronization of configuration and routing protocols happening between active and standby, because active is still running the previous version of software, and active can be reloaded in a fast manner. Then standby takes over, becomes new active, old active comes back with the proper software, and the SSO happens. And we are basically forming the stack again. And again, the only difference is that the active and a standby switched places during the process. And the total traffic disruption should take less than 30 seconds. So there are two flavors. There is a fast software upgrade and extended fast software upgrade. Fast software upgrade limits the downtime, but extended fast software upgrade should keep it below 30 seconds. So that's why it's an XFSU, not FSU. And this is supported with the stack switches. So this is the cheat sheet that I've mentioned. You have the chart which platform supports which HA capabilities. And if it comes to XFSU and ISSU, you can see that the XFSU and fast software upgrade and XFSU is supported by 9300 series devices, and ISSU is by the multi-chassis and modular switches. And I'm going to leave it for the reference. I guess that it's already there available, so you can study it more carefully. So, what platform choice do we have if we're talking about all of the above? So, if you're thinking about designing your network, then you should rely on the platforms that are allowing you to perform whatever you really want. And this is where Catalyst 9000 family comes into play. On the left-hand side, we have access switches, platforms, and as you can see on top, we've added new expansions to previously introduced series. So 92 got added 92CX. 93, we have 9300X that I already mentioned. It's capable of running up to 1 terabit per second if stacked together, 8 devices are stacked together. We have also 9400, so modular option for access, and we've introduced 9400X. Additionally, as you can see on top, 9300X and 9400X have enhanced app hosting capabilities. Therefore, if you're looking into deploying some application within your LAN network or the access layer, like Thousand Eyes, App Dynamics applications, then you're able to run 2 applications simultaneously on each of these devices. So access switching has never been so easy. We've got really complete portfolio from the density of port as well as the power over Ethernet, power budgeting perspective on access. On the core layer side, from the other hand, and we've also expanded the family with Cat9K X series. So 9500 is right now also, you've got more dense and higher speeds portion of portfolio with 9500X. And the same goes for the 9600X. We've introduced new supervisor and new uplink downlink line card. So it allows you to not only allocate entire routing table of entire internet, but also it works at very high scale and high speeds, up to 400 gigs of uplinks, which are already hardware ready, and the software should be ready shortly. If you want to learn more about the architecture of Catalyst 9K, then definitely visit 2035. But this one is BRK ARC session 2035 that will answer on all the questions and also will cover all the differences between the platforms. Especially interesting and the latest addition to the family is Catalyst 9200 CX. Many, I know, have been waiting for these devices. These are compact switches, especially suitable for IoT use cases, smart buildings. They are capable of the PoE pass-through, as well as their small form factor. So they are here to replace 3650 minis. So this is a natural progression from previous Catalyst 3K platform. Do you have any questions on the platform choice? It's just the one slide there for the reference, but maybe something's not clear. However, I guess that most of you already have a handful of 9,000 switches devices running. So the main information is that we are not getting rid of previously released 9K switches. So we've just expanded our family. So 92, 93, 94, 95, and 6 are still supported and will be. And 96, the X series, that we've added the X factor, but it's just to add on a speed side to those customers which are really looking for the high-speed ports, high density of high-speed ports. So we got to the summary. Our design fundamentals being covered. So what should we keep in mind when leaving this session? First of all, that CVDs are providing the framework. So we've discussed that Cisco collected the knowledge collected across years and thousands of deployments, and we are constantly upgrading our approach to deploy the networks and in a highly available manner, as well as in a way that will be easy to manage. So that's why you should start your journey when deploying the network with a CVD to go through what's recommended, what's the best way to approach campus wired LAN design, just not to make mistakes and sleep well. Access layer should be consistent, should satisfy layer 2 and also layer 3 applications requirements. It should be a security boundary for our campus wired network. Prepared also for the advanced technologies. Then the distribution layer should be aggregation of everything that we have in access, and you should lean towards either channeling the ports, the links from the access to the distribution if you want to utilize it very efficiently. Then core layer, this is the very and most important part of our network. You should consider deploying it if you haven't done so yet. And it should be scalable, resilient from layer 3 perspective, from a failure perspective, and it should be fairly simple from configuration perspective, not to make you come back and reapply configuration or readjust it over and over. Then we have the second part of the summary. Well, the wired campus LAN should be based on modularity and hierarchy. This is something that I've covered at the very beginning, and you remember that it's easy to scale out and scale in, so we are flexible and our devices are serving a specific purpose, so we remember about the chain of command. And then SD access for a next generation of campus networking is a very viable option, but it requires some preparation, as some of you might have experienced. However, I really encourage you to do so because it allows you to expand security and securing your network to the level that you haven't experienced before. So it's really worth to investigate the possibility of deploying SD access. And if you're thinking about it, and especially if it's a new deployment, you're not migrating the old devices, but you're deploying new network, SD access is the way to go. Don't forget that the security should be on top of your mind. We should secure our network from inside and outside. Don't forget about the very inverted bottom of the inverted pyramid, but also at the very top. High availability, and actually it's a funny fact, we've run one of the trainings towards our partners and customers some time back, and we asked what's the top of your mind from the feature perspective? What should we focus while delivering the sessions? What should be the most important for you while deploying the network? And high availability was, in Europe, it was top of mind for most of the customers and partners. So it's a really important topic. We shouldn't forget about it, because especially now in a dangerous times, we can't forget about making sure that our network will be resilient and will survive whatever comes. And then Catalyst switching switching product portfolio has all it takes for you to be successful. So if you rely on very reliable switches, then you know that whatever you'll deploy will be there, stay there, and will be resilient and secure. So here we've got published design guides, and you can access them through those two links. And there are two ways actually to consume the CVDs. First is through Design Zone, and there you can download only the PDFs, or you can read them in HTML version. However, here we've got the second link to our community, and on this community you are able to ask a question to our experts, to our TMEs, technical marketing engineers, which will be able to answer your specific question about specific feature or a specific applying this feature in reality. So use our community, because it's worth to get a hold of our TMEs from each and every technology. Once again, if you haven't done so, most probably on the previous session, morning session, you were reminded we're really waiting to listen back from you about how did you like the lineup? How did you like the content, the venue? Of course, maybe the temperature got better thanks to you at the end, so we're not that cold anymore. But if you will feel for service, then you'll be able to get a Cisco Live Amsterdam t-shirt, so it's worth to play. I'm also looking forward to hearing back from you. How did you like the content? And maybe if the parts are obsolete and outdated in your opinion, then definitely I'll be looking into reading your comments about improving this session. So please do continue your education. I'm up for meeting with some of you if you'd like to consult the design or maybe discuss some specific features. I'm here for you. Attend different Cisco Live sessions from our ENS track. And having said that, I would like to remind that best practices don't hurt, but really help. And sometimes it may feel like a longer road around the topic, but at the end, you can sleep well if you deploy networks according to Cisco validated design. And having said that, I would like to thank you very much for attending my session, and it was a pleasure.